she traveled to get here. But I'm not going to tell you her name. My name's Al Wyman, and I work here at the Science Center, and we want to welcome you to the first session of SciFest 2011. It's a science festival, and we like to celebrate science and people in science. And to get it really kicked off is a gentleman who likes to be called the Little I Prez. He's the interim president of the St. Louis Science Center, and he is an eminent scientist in his own right. Please welcome the interim president of the St. Louis Science Center, Dr. Phil Needleman.
It's really delightful to introduce Sandra Magnus.
Fergie, and on your far left, he's the commander, Chris Ferguson, retired Navy captain. He had flown 3 times. This was his 3rd flight, and twice as commander. He was actually the commander of the mission that took me to the space station in November of 2008. It was great to be working with him again. Doug Hurley, Marine Colonel, active duty. This was his 2nd flight. He was our pilot. And then on the other side of me is Rex Walheim, retired colonel in the Air Force. This is also his 3rd flight. And Rex and I started in the astronaut program together in 1996, so it was really great to be flying with a classmate. We were a crew of 4, which I said it was very unusual. Normally you have 6 or 7 people on a shuttle crew. And it was very challenging, this training flow, because we only were a crew of 4. And we were driven to be a crew of 4 by the fact that we were the last shuttle mission, and we did not have a shuttle, therefore, to come rescue us in case something happened during launch that precluded the shuttle being able to do the re-entry. If you recall, after the Columbia accident, NASA made a rule that stated that there will always be a shuttle on the pad ready to launch a crew to rescue the previous crew if their shuttle would get damaged. So our rescue scenario was a little bit different. If for some reason when we launched on our mission and our shuttle was not able to re-enter, we were going to be remaining on the space station, and we would be coming down one by one in the right seat of the Soyuz capsule. They bring Soyuz capsules up and down on a 3-month rotation, so that meant with 4 people, it would take us a year to get everybody home in case we were stranded. Doug drew the short straw. He was going to be up there for a year. I would be up there for 9 months, which in my case, I was actually pretty excited about it because another 9 months on station would be a lot of fun. It's a great place to live. But fortunately, the shuttle was able to re-enter safely, and we came back as scheduled on the shuttle. But it did, like I said, it made the training flow very, very busy because we all had to kind of do everything and cover each other. And on orbit during the mission, I have never been so busy in my whole entire life as we were during this mission. It was go, go, go the whole time. We started training a little over a year ago, and there was a lot of attention on the mission. We saw this photo when we got back, and for those of you that made it to launch, this is probably a very familiar photo because there was a lot of interest because it was a last shuttle flight, and I think they expected nearly 1 million people in Florida to watch the launch. And I remember thinking that while we were on the launch pad, it's like, we need to launch because this traffic jam just can't keep going on day after day after day as people are coming and trying to watch us. But we were amazed nonetheless when we got back and saw the pictures of all the people who had managed to come to Florida. And launch day, it was very busy for us. We slept 2 hours later because we were going to be awake for several hours longer on orbit because, again, we were doing the job of about 6 people to get the orbiter set for orbit ops. So we woke up late. So the minute we woke up, we had breakfast. We go put our orange suits on about 4 hours before launch, and they take us out to the launch pad right away. And this time I timed it. I was on my back probably between 2.5 hours and 2 hours and 45 minutes. So once they strap us in, so it's rush, 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 get out to the vehicle, and then you lay there on your back for several hours, and it's not very comfortable. And we weren't sure we were going to go because the weather was really cloudy. While we were laying there listening to the mission, the launch control team work all of their procedures, and we'd get weather reports every now and then, and Fergie and Doug were looking out the window and letting Rex and I know, okay, there's clouds, okay, no, there's no clouds, oh, the clouds are back, and we're launching, not launching, launching, so we really didn't know if we were going to launch or not. And then once we came out of the T-9 hold, there's a hold there at the last, just 9 minutes before launch, they hold for a little while. When you come out of the T-9 hold, you know you're going to go. And so that last 9 minutes does not feel like 9 minutes. It feels like 3 minutes. Because time is very compressed, because all of a sudden, all the waiting is over, the count starts, and here you go, 9 minutes, 8 minutes, 7 minutes. And there's a certain sequence of events that happens, and we train that last 9 minutes before launch very thoroughly. Well, this time, and you'll see this in the video I brought that sort of highlights our flight, but you'll see in the video that at T-minus 31 seconds, and those of you who remember this, T-minus 31 seconds, we hear this voice come up over the loops. It says, we're going to stop the launch at 31 seconds due to a failure. And we're looking at each other going, failure? What failure? You can't have a failure. These rockets are going to light in 31 seconds. And the auxiliary power units are on, and you can't stop now. What failure? Meanwhile, Fergie's going, everybody be quiet. I'm trying to hear what's going on. It was really kind of exciting because it's very rare that a launch stops that close to going off. And what had happened was, you'll see this in the movie, there's a beanie cap, a little hood, that sits on top of the orange tank, and it stays there until right before launch. And right before launch, the arm swings it out of the way, and then you're clear to go. Well, the micro switch that indicated to the launch control center that the arm had moved was failed, and so they had to swing a camera out and verify that the cap was clear so we could launch. And they did that within a couple of minutes, which to us it felt like an eternity. But they did, and they started the count, and that time compression thing was even worse, because as Rex likes to put it, it was 3, 2, 1, bam, we're launching. And we really weren't prepared for it. And Fergie had his abort procedures out. He thought we were going to abort and, have to try again on another day. And it was just really an interesting launch. It was much different than my other two. So we had a little bit of excitement all the way up to the last minute. And you'll see some of that in the movie. So it takes us only 8.5 minutes to go from 0 to 17,500 miles per hour, which is our orbital velocity. And when we have main engine cutoff at 8.5 minutes, we are in a 100-mile up orbit. So we go up to about 100 miles and we stabilize our orbit. We spend the next couple of days catching up to the space station, which usually hangs out somewhere between 200 and 220 miles above the surface of the Earth. This is a picture that was taken from the space station as we paused right below it, about 600 feet below it. And what we do here is we stop, and the space station crew takes a picture of us as we rotate the shuttle a complete somersault, and they can take pictures of the tiles on the bottom of the orbiter and the thermal protection system on the wing leading edges and make sure there was no damage sustained during launch. And that's how we know that the orbiter's ready for re-entry and it's okay. And this would happen to be taken while we were over the Caribbean, which from my viewpoint is the most beautiful part of the world. When I lived on station, I never got tired of looking at the Caribbean because of all the blues and the greens and the changes in the water there. It's just absolutely beautiful. In the payload bay, you see a metal cylinder. That's called the MPLM. That's our cargo module. And that was the main purpose of our mission, was to take this cargo module and dock it to the space station using the robotic arm, and you'll see that in the movie as well. So inside that cargo module was 10,000 pounds of supplies, and the goal of the mission was to supply the station with enough food and consumables and spare parts and science equipment so that it could last for a year without a resupply from the United States. With the retirement of the shuttle, we have several commercial companies who are going to be delivering cargo in their vehicles, and they're still coming online, and we needed some margin in our schedule. So that was one of the goals of our mission, was to get all of this 10,000 pounds of equipment out of the MPLM into the station. We actually brought 6,000 pounds back. So that's what we did most of the time we were docked, was moving stuff left and right. And this shows a picture of the inside of that cargo module, and this is right after we docked. It's still clean. We haven't messed it up yet by opening up all those bags. Inside all those bags is a lot of equipment and where the food and everything else is. And there's actually another row of bags behind those bags. And then on the floor and the ceiling, there's some more bags and some more doors and racks and things that there was equipment in. And it was really, really hectic moving all of this equipment. But it was sort of like a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. The other thing that happened while we were on station was that the station crew performed a spacewalk. This is a little bit unusual in that when a shuttle crew arrives to station, they usually bring the spacewalk team with them as part of the shuttle crew. But again, because we were a crew of 4, we didn't have time to train for everything else that we had to train for and train for a complete spacewalk. So what happened was, while we were on the ground preparing and the spacewalk was getting developed. Rex was in charge of getting the choreography and the planning for the spacewalk down, working with the team that does that. He and I trained a little bit in the pool to make sure that the big picture work and the general flow of the spacewalk was defined well enough. And then when we got on board, Mike Fossum and Ron Guerin actually performed the spacewalk. Rex and Mike and Ron talked about 3 hours the night before to make sure they had all the details down, and that allowed us to get it done. And the purpose of the spacewalk was to bring back this refrigerator-sized pump module that had failed the year before. And this pump module, it's very important to understand why it failed. It's a pump for the ammonia, which is the fluid that we use in the exterior cooling system to keep the heat load off the station. So it's a very important piece of equipment. If we lose the cooling system, we lose half of the electrical power on the station. So we didn't understand why this pump module failed before the lifetime that we had designed into it was up. And so it was important to bring this back so the engineers could take it apart and figure out why it failed, so then we knew how we could mitigate any other ones failing. They had done a spacewalk off of the space station, a series of 3 spacewalks that had been done the year before to replace the failed one with the spare that we had up there. So we had fixed the problem with the spare, but this one that had failed we were going to bring home. So during the spacewalk, with Mike on the arm, we went and picked up the broken pump module and then flew him. Doug and I flew the arm, and we flew him over to the payload bay, and we were able to attach the pump module in the payload bay. And that's actually one of the things we're going to miss with the shuttle is its capacity to bring back very, very large items. It's unique to any vehicle that's ever been built to go into space. And it's going to be very, very hard to replace that, because if anything the size of a pump module fails in the future, we're not going to be able to bring it home and analyze it. So we had to get this one last shot with the shuttle to bring that home. Of course, when we got to the space station, there were 6 people living there. When I was there in 2008, early 2009, we were the last 3-person crew, and it was the task of that particular mission I was on to get the station set for 6 people. We added a couple of bedrooms, we added some exercise equipment, we added an extra toilet, we added the water regeneration system. And once that was all operational, after Mike and I left from Expedition 18, they started putting 6 people on board. You know, we've had people living there since 2000, but it's been a crew of 3 up until the summer of 2009 when we upped the crew size to 6. So while we were there was a Japanese, 2 American, and 3 Russians on board. And usually it's a mix of American, Russian, Japanese, Canadian, and European. These are all the different countries that are participating in the space station program. And it really was a lot of fun. You know, to go dock to the station is really spectacular. And then to be up there with people who've been living there for several months is a lot of fun as well. But even though we were busy, we were able to spend some time together in the evenings. This was in the Russian segment where the Russian galley is, and we went down there and had dinner one night. There's another galley on the space station in Node 1, sort of in the center of the stack. We had dinner there one night, and then we invited them over to the shuttle, and we had dinner on the shuttle one night. So we had sort of a roaming potluck dinner while we were up there. And it's important to take that time to spend together and enjoy being in space and sharing such a unique experience with your friends. This is a picture of St. Louis that I took during Expedition 18, and you can see the stadiums. Like, for example, if anybody would have taken a picture on Thursday, I'm sure this would have been a little bit red tinged. And then, of course, the football stadium, the Poplar Street Bridge, Spaghetti Network on the east side. So this is west, this is east, north, and then south. And then the rest of downtown. It was kind of fun when I was up there for 4.5 months to try and get nice pictures of the area. Of course, I was up there during winter, and so you know how cloudy and gloomy it can be in winter, so it was kind of hard to get some pictures. I have some pictures further on the east side. I was trying to get a picture of Mom's house for her, so she could, it's like, you live here. But that's one thing you never get tired of doing, no matter how much time you spend in space, is looking out the window. And even if you didn't start being at the beginning, have photography instincts, by the end of the time on orbit, you are a photographer and constantly taking pictures. Another thing that you can see out the window are things like this. The expedition guys took this. It's the Southern Lights. Okay. And this is the kind of thing that if you just glance out the window, you can see, you know, I saw an iceberg one day, I saw a volcano erupting one day. The Southern Lights are just absolutely spectacular. And going over at nighttime, going over the different continents, you can clearly see where people live, as defined by the city lights. A little bit about where we're going next. As John mentioned, we're retiring the shuttle now. We've known since 2004 that in 2010 we would be retiring the shuttle. And basically, to give you a little background, what had happened after the Columbia accident was that the investigation board determined that, hey, we've been flying these shuttles for a couple decades at that point, and they were never really designed to fly that long. So if you want to continue to fly them, and they use 2010 as the sort of the cutoff point, if you want to fly them past 2010, you are going to need to do a major overhaul on the airframe. You're going to have to look closely at the wiring. The wiring has a lot of Kapton on it, it's brittle, it breaks, and that makes the wiring a little bit more dangerous. You might have to replace the wiring, you have to look at the airframe and make sure there's no metal fatigue and things like this going on. It was going to be a major overhaul. And so the question we have in front of us as a nation was, okay, so in 2010, did we take all the money, did we spend a lot of money and resources in refurbishing this fleet, which goes into low Earth orbit only, it's limited to low Earth orbit, or do we say, okay, this is great, we've flown them for 30 years, let's call it quits, let's take that money instead and invest in a vehicle that will take us out of low Earth orbit into, expand the frontier to the moon or Mars or asteroid, anywhere beyond low Earth orbit. And the decision was made back in 2004 that in 2010 we're going to retire the shuttles, we're going to take that money and we're going to go beyond low Earth orbit and make a vehicle that can not only do low Earth orbit, but can take you beyond. And so we've known for a long time that the shuttles are going to retire. And therefore, the workforce actually had a great attitude while we were going through this last mission because they know it's been coming. But what we're doing now is there's 4 commercial companies that are competing to create the next rocket that's going to be used to deliver U.S. astronauts on U.S. rockets to the space station. Right now we're sending people up on the Russian Soyuz. Everybody's going on the Soyuz. And we really do need 2 ways to get to the space station. It's just smart business. So these 4 companies are competing to build private rockets that NASA would contract out as a service, either as a taxi or a rental car, depending upon which kind of model you're using, depending on which kind of company you are, that they would deliver U.S. astronauts to the space station. And then NASA is focusing on building a heavy lift rocket similar to the Saturn V, but slightly larger, that will take us out of low Earth orbit. And there's a big debate going on right now. We would go to the moon, or we go to Mars, or we go to asteroid, or we put depots up in high Earth orbit and service satellites and so forth and so on. So while that debate's going on, we know we still need the rocket. We're going to build the rocket. So that's what's going on at NASA. And what we did on this mission is we took this American flag up with us to space station. This American flag flew on STS-1, Columbia, when she launched 30 years ago. And that's their patch on one side, and then our patch, the final mission, on the other. And this flag is attached to the hatch where the shuttle normally docks at the forward end of the space station. And we left the flag there. And whoever wins this competition to send U.S. astronauts on U.S. rockets to the space station can go get that flag and bring it back. And then they'll present the flag to NASA, and they will take that flag with us on our heavy lift rocket and send it beyond low Earth orbit with the first crew to do that. So we left it up there as a goal, a prize, a monument to what the space program has already achieved and what we hope to achieve in the future. So with that, actually, I'd like to stop, and hopefully you guys have some questions and answers, or we can do a question and answer session and interact with a little bit. And Al, just let me know when we run out of time. And or Phil, let me know we run out of time. The government, of course, is one of the main customers to get people to the space station, but they're looking also, you probably heard about space tourists. They're still have to be very wealthy to do that. But there's also cases where they're hoping to get business to service satellites. And if you have your own private rocket and you can go to a satellite and you can refuel a satellite, you can extend its life for a little while, and that saves a company a lot of money. And then there's other companies that might be interested in doing research, small types of research on it. So there's a bunch of companies out there who think we may have reached the point where they can make a business out of low Earth orbit. And this is actually a good thing from the viewpoint that as a government agency we should be moving moving the country forward and developing new technologies and developing new markets, developing new boundaries for people to work in. So that means we've been doing our job. Are we concerned about the safety part? Yes, we are. However, we do have the experience that we've gained at NASA is available for all these companies to utilize, because again, we are a government agency and it's our job to do the hard thing and then hand this information over to the technical community and the private sector. And the good thing about this interest in low Earth orbit is it allows us as a government agency to take that next step and do that next hard thing, which is expand the frontier a little bit more. But it's going to be an interesting time. Space flight is still very dangerous. There's still a lot of risk associated. You still have to approach it with an open mind and a careful attitude. So we'll see what happens. Yeah, and of course, the reasons why we didn't go to the moon had a lot more to do with political will and economics than it did with technology. It's kind of the same battle we're constantly fighting in the space program, is that there's a lot of demands upon our national budget. And the type of work that we do in the space program, of course, is long term. You know, it takes 5-10 years to build a rocket. The space station, we've been building it for 11, 12 years, and we had to construct it on the ground before that. So pretty soon it's 20 years ago by. And so it takes a long time to do some of the space program, and it's hard to get these commitments for these long-term projects. Of course, the return on investment is huge as well, but it takes a little bit longer to pay it off. And so we had some momentum going with the moon, and then some economics and some political will became an issue, and they stopped, unfortunately.
So you might add a log to thinking about going to Mars.
There are people who are vigorously debating these days whether we should go hang out at the moon for a while and build a base there, whether we should go directly to Mars and bypass the moon. And there's another group who stridently believe that we need to go visit an asteroid because that represents a threat to life on Earth if an asteroid comes at the Earth and impacts the way we think happened to cause the extinction of the dinosaurs, and we would be in big trouble. And so these three different camps of people are arguing where we should go.
You have a question?
Very good.
I noticed that you were the only female astronaut, so what was that experience like for you?
Well, you know, the office itself is about 20% female. I happen to be the only female on this mission. And quite frankly, I feel with the three guys on my crew, I feel like I've inherited three brothers. That's really what it feels like, because you're very close to your crew because you train together for a year, and you almost get the point where you're with your siblings, you kind of poke at them, you know where the weak points are, and you pick on them, and we do that with each other. But there's really no issues with that. I was actually in middle school, as Phil mentioned, when I dreamed of becoming an astronaut. And I like to say I was a little shy about it because it seems like a really elaborate, unusual thing to go do, and I was just a little girl in Illinois. Why did I think I'd ever get to do something like that? I didn't want to look back on my life and think, what if? I didn't want to be 47 years old like I am now and think, what if I would have tried to be an astronaut? Could I have made it? I decided to try for it because you never know what can happen. And I've always liked math and science. Physics was just one of my favorite subjects. And I had this idea. It's like, okay, you're not knowing much about the world. I very naively came up with this plan that I was going to, and this is about high school. I was going to college, and I was going to get a bachelor's degree in physics, and I was going to get a master's degree in physics, and I was going to get a PhD in physics, and I was going to apply to NASA, then I was going to be an astronaut, and life would be good. I did go to college. I went to Rolla, and I studied physics. But there at Rolla, I learned about engineering. And I got down to Rolla, and it's like, oh, this engineering stuff's kind of cool. So I decided to go ahead, and I got a job offer at McDonnell Douglas, and there's some of my comrades here in the audience from McDonnell Douglas, so they probably remember me when I was a green 21-year-old naive young lady coming to work at McDonnell Douglas. We were building an airplane, which was a brand new thing for me, and learning how you build an airplane. You have a lot to do with materials, and materials drive a lot of your design processes and your decisions, and that made me get interested in materials. The program I was working on actually got canceled, and that gave me the opportunity to think, okay, I've got some work experience, I'm still focused on being an astronaut, I'm gonna go get my PhD. And that was something I had as a personal goal anyway. So I went to Georgia Tech, I got my PhD in materials, and then I felt that it was time to apply to the program. And I was lucky enough to get in. But the point is, figure out what you want to do, don't sell yourself short, go for it, see what happens, make a plan, but be flexible enough as you make your plan to adjust it as you learn new things, things maybe you didn't know about when you originally made your plan. You're having a lot of fun while you're traveling on your journey to get where you eventually want to go.